Welcome to Watching the Horizon. I'm Jake. This is sort of an impromptu video, so no special thumbnail or editing or anything like that. But, I got to thinking, with everything going on in the world today and whatnot, it's understandable that a lot of our attention is focused inward. A lot of politics, whether or not you're going to get the jab, that kind of thing. And that's not really what I'm here to talk about. I have more of a hypothetical question, sort of a thought experiment, if you will. So if you were pre-World War II, okay, and you were thinking to yourself, this country just might go to war. What types of preparations would you make today differently than you would make from back then? Because back then there was a lot of saber rattling and we kind of knew that we were going to get involved. It was just a question of when. Because for all intents and purposes, the war had been going on for, quite some time, and we were attempting to keep out of it without really keeping out of it. But the hypothetical question, being, if we were in that same situation where if we were looking back in time to today, knowing that there would be some sort of large world war, what would we have prepared for? What would you do differently today than you would if there was no prospect of war on the table? Again, it's just a hypothetical question. I've heard some other people talk about what it could be. One person mentioned that they would actually purchase electronics, because right now there's, as a lot of you I'm sure are aware, there's this huge shortage of superconductors and special metals that they use to make chips. And so we've got acres and acres of cars brand new off the factory line, just without any sort of chips, and they can't be sold without them. And so we get a lot of that stuff from China. My understanding is we get the overwhelming majority from them. But due to, pandemic and supply chain issues, there was already a shortage before all of that because they had shut down one of their factories. And of course, things only got worse with the current state of affairs. But one would, I think, reasonably conclude that if there was some sort of global conflict, that we could count on that shortage being extended probably indefinitely. And so I get where they were coming from. They were saying, I'd go ahead and buy some consumer electronics, if they were thinking about buying that car, that they would go ahead and do that now while, the getting was still good. It's not that stuff is completely unavailable. It's just more expensive than it has been in the past because of, the shortages. But it got me to thinking, what other things would you do differently than your regular preparations if, in fact, you knew that there was going to be some kind of global conflict, say a month from now, or 6 months from now, or exactly 1 year from today? I am not making any sort of claim or anything. It's just, truly a thought experiment. What would you do differently? And I do think there's something to, making some of these purchases, because we predominantly import a lot of our stuff. And, we've already got this issue of all of these boats parked off the coast, just waiting to come ashore, to get offloaded. And it's like, and if there was a conflict, say that it erupted today, every single one of those boats becomes a target. And, anything that was on its way here is, now sitting at the bottom of the ocean. And so we would be forced with, we'd be stuck with what we got, basically. So just wanted to hear your thoughts, honestly, because I'm searching through what it would be, covering the basics, things like, food and water, protection, make sure that you have enough, ammunition for your protection, that kind of thing. But other than, some of the specialty items, the only other thing that I can come up with is fuel. Not necessarily gasoline or diesel, although if you're capable of storing that, that's always good to have a supply. But, if you're out in the woods kind of thing, lumber is probably plentiful for you. And so, you're okay. But reading in on some of the history, like around the Great Depression when food became scarce, you couldn't really go hunting. A lot of people talk about just going into the woods, to scavenge for food if there was some sort of food shortage. And I understand the mentality, but that's only because right now things are plenty. But if we got hit in a hard way and our food supply got hit, then you're not really going to be able to hunt, at least not for very long before everything is going to get hunted out or everything will just migrate north, well out of our range. That's what happened last time. You couldn't hardly find a deer to save your life. But anyway, I digress. So fuel, pros and cons to wood. It's labor intensive. You have to season it, dry it out, that kind of thing. And that's good. It takes up a lot of space. And it has the potential to rot. And so I think that maybe the only other difference that I might make is I would look at purchasing coal. Only for, heating and cooking purposes kind of thing. It doesn't rot. As long as you put it in a decent container. Like if you wanted to bury it, you could bury it without any issue. And it stores really well. And I believe the energy to weight ratio is much higher than wood. And it's still relatively cheap. If you're able to buy it by the ton, I understand if you're living in an apartment or a suburban or urban setting, that's just not going to be an option for you. I totally get that. But, rather than split cords and cords of wood, instead load up 55-gallon barrels of coal, and you can keep it outside. You don't have to worry too much. But fuel is one of the things that came to my mind, and I did appreciate the comment about electronics being something else. But what else would you prep for if you knew there was going to be a global conflict in the very near future? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Anyway, thanks a lot, and be sure to keep your eyes open.